Hello. Don't think I can hear you. Yeah,
Hello.
I'm
There
not
we
hearing
go.
you.
Hello now? No? Looking for a mute button or something. Can you hear me now? Hello? No? Now?
No, nothing.
Hmm.
There's no one over here.
Do I have access to...
Maybe try like turning the microphone off and on, like in the settings. Should be somewhere in setting in the more.
How about now?
No, nothing.
And now?
Maybe try like swapping back to the like built-in mic and then back again.
I just did that.
Someone had an issue with this last week too, and I don't remember what it was they did to connect the audio.
Well,
No rush. We're gonna let people filter in anyway. So okay. Good. Yeah, I can't hear. Do you want to try the good old log off and log back on again?
about now, Sam.
Nothing. I wonder what the problem is.
How about now?
No,
Anything?
not
Nothing?
sure. I still can't hear you. Hmm. Oh, hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. All right.
How about now?
Yeah. Okay. My fault. It picked up my microphone as my speaker, which shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, mine does that sometimes too.
Yeah, it like thinks the Blue Yeti is a speaker.
Yeah. Because like theoretically you could run headphones through it and then listen
Right.
directly through. I don't know what the
Like
use case is for that, but I believe it.
yeah, I suppose if you it's like input monitoring, so you can
Yeah.
like hear how loud that would be so annoying though, hearing your own voice come back through your own headphones over and over again.
Right? Totally annoying.
That'd drive me crazy. And we'll just let people filter in. There were like 15 people signed up last night, so I assume there'll be more than the one that is here right now.
let's hope and trust.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna make another post on Facebook real quick so
Okay.
that so people are aware.
And then like as people come in, are they going to be using the chat? Are they going to be using the Q&A? They won't be in the room with us like visible, right?
Right, it'll be the Q&A thing. One
Okay.
weird quirk we found with this Q&A thing is you have to scroll it yourself. It doesn't auto scroll for some reason. So, I
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I've never seen a chat that doesn't auto scroll.
Ah,
But yeah, we've noticed that you have to just kind of keep scrolling it um,
okay.
to see all the other messages and everything.
Okay,
Uh,
cool. And can the people who are in the room see what's happening in the Q&A?
Yeah, so it's basically a chat
Okay,
essentially.
great.
The chat is just for you and me. So like those chat messages that you sent to me, only I can see those.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
yeah.
So I
Um,
look like a little less of a doofus, like, to the
well,
room at
I
large.
fault though, so my bad on that one. Um,
Whatever.
but yeah, you can like ask people to post things in the Q&A, and they'll be able to write that while you're talking, and you should be able to keep that open on the side the whole time. I shouldn't have to give you permissions or anything to screen share or anything like that. You should be able to just do it because you're a co-organizer.
Perfect.
Um,
I don't even have a share. I'm just gonna talk and
Beautiful. There is a really weird when I start the broadcast. There's this like really weird voiceover that will be like, it's like an Indian lady who's like, "You are now recording your lesson." And it does it like twice, so you'll hear it. It's weird, but it like counts down, and then it's like two different voices too, which I think is even stranger. Um,
baffling.
yeah, it's such a weird little platform. We use this though because this is like where we keep all of our Zoho's like kind of like HubSpot or like Salesforce. It's like a CRM for managing like customers and everything. So they've
Mhm.
got like 200 tools built right into the platform.
Nice.
Um, there's still like one person. It's just two. It looks like Sarah Flint has joined twice. So let me just put this
Well,
out.
she's real eager, so I like that.
Uh, I'm just gonna put this up um, again on the Facebook real quick. There were, like I said, there were like 15 signups last night. So usually when there's that many, there's usually like, at least half of them have shown up
Yeah,
uh, for the thing. And of course, they could just filter in as we go. This will be recorded and it will be shared with everyone
great.
uh, who attended. And if you're okay with it, we'll put it up on our website in the like webinar section.
Terrific.
Cool. Um, Yeah, and I'll be here the whole time. I'll just mute myself and go hide in the corner.
Great.
Cool. So you want to just kind of get rolling, and then we can just, as people filter in.
Let's just see what happens.
Sounds good. All right. Hmm.
Awesome. Are you gonna intro
Okay.
me, Sam?
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I was just waiting to see if the recording. All right, we
Great.
should be going live right about now. So, um, hello everyone. This is the fourth episode of our summer series. This week we have my good friend Jennet Ingle. So she is pretty much an expert in groups and group teaching and methodologies of that nature, but also the host of the Crushing Classical podcast. And I know you have a ton of other, projects and courses and programs out there, like the Read Club and the Flow and all of the other things that you're doing. So feel free to tell everyone who you are and what you do. But this week we'll be going over group teaching methodologies and best practices and things of that nature. But yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Sam. I am so excited to get to talk to you today. I am Jennet Ingle, as Sam mentioned, and I'm going to talk about group teaching and why I love it so much and how it can absolutely benefit you in your own teaching. Now, I understand that I'm talking to a room full of music teachers, and so you have your own expertise already. I know that you do. Um, so in the chat, or actually in the Q&A, which is what we're going to be using, you should let me know whether you're doing any groups now, um like maybe type a 1 in there if you use them all the time or exclusively, or if you're a classroom teacher and you do nothing but groups. Maybe type a 2 if you have like 1 or 2 special group events every year, once or twice, a recital, a holiday party, a games and scales kind of activity. Or maybe type a 3 if you don't use groups at all. You're just teaching one-to-one lessons all the time. As I said, we're going to be using the Q&A. And I will also point out that, like, I'm a person who thrives on interaction. But so, like, please feel free to, like, leap in there with me at any point and ask questions, because I'm okay with getting interrupted and digressing and coming back to what I was planning to talk about. In the chat, Sarah's like, I tried once, both students quit. Quit? Like, quit altogether after you like tried to make them be in a group? That is hilarious and sad, and like, let's see if we can talk about that and make it better. And Sam says, I do one group. We have a group lesson. It's an infrequent event. A VR. Oh, on virtual reality. That's cool. I'm not fancy. I just do Zoom. So I'm Jennet Ingle. I am a performer. I'm a teacher. I'm an author of the book The Happiest Musician. I'm an entrepreneur, a podcaster, a business and creative coach for musicians. And I spent decades teaching oboe lessons in the absolute most traditional way, right? Like the way we were all taught. Individual lessons every single week, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour. Sometimes at schools and at universities where I was the adjunct oboe professor, some at my home, some online. I taught 6th graders, which is the youngest that anyone ever really starts the oboe, and up through grad students, and I taught adults. I loved everything that I was doing. And I really got to know my students, and I loved them in a teacherly way. And really, one of my favorite things about teaching is always that my favorite thing about teaching is communication, right? It's that magical moment where you hit upon, as the teacher, the right combination of words and examples and metaphors to really like break the concept open for your student. And sometimes that takes some trying, some questing around. You have to try this metaphor, you have to try this metaphor, this metaphor. So I had a lot of different like shtick about how to make a good oboe embouchure, and how to think about 3/4 time, and how to voice, and how to create vibrato on the air, like all of those things. I did a lot of it. So I'm coming to you today, in other words, as not a classroom teacher with tons of experience wrangling children and herding cats and like having games and activities, but rather as a deeply experienced private teacher who is also an introvert and who is busy. I mentioned my list of portfolio career streams, and I'm sure I didn't even get to half of it. I do a million things, as I'm sure you do. I have a quick story of burnout in my own life, right? It was 2019, and I was playing a concert. I was playing Brahms' First Symphony, which is my favorite of all of the sort of warhorse overplayed dead European male masterworks. And I was having a great time, and I'm like in my orchestra with all of my colleagues whom I loved, with a conductor I really liked, and I'm in the 4th movement, and I'm about to play my favorite solo, and this little voice inside my head went, what is even the point? And like, that was a voice that I had to listen to. And when I zoomed out a little bit and looked at my calendar, I realized that I had taught 18 private lessons that week, and I had given a recital, and I was in the middle of my 5th service of the orchestra, and I was, running my kid to school and back from home from school every day. And I had done like other things in other towns. I'm driving all over the place. I have a thriving read business. I had made 100 reads or something. And I realized it was just too much. And for the money, the energy required to teach a single private lesson to a student was not working for me. It's not the one private lesson, of course. It's the every single week at 4:15 Tuesday, I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to play my solo for you, and it's going to be 1% improved from last week. And so I'm going to pour my energy and my knowledge and my life force and everything I've got into your empty bucket to try to like inch your solo forward from 1% better to 5% better. And then next week you'll come back because it's Tuesday at 4:15, not because you want to, but because it's Tuesday. And it will be back to 3%. And I'll try to get it to 7%. That model of teaching had burned me out so badly that at the end of that school year, I graduated all of the students who I could graduate, and I fired everybody else. I had to stop. I couldn't do it anymore. I loved it, but I had to stop. And it was maybe 6 months after that that I missed it. I was like, what could I do that doesn't cost me this much in terms of energy output, time, hours spent? What could I do to create something that I can do the things I love to do with people and help people and like get my energy and my message and my musical authority out into the world for people, but not like this? And that's when I created the first of my group programs, which was the Invincible Oboist. It was basically 10 weeks at that time, 3 months later, of curriculum-based, this is how we oboe. And I intended it to be for adults, and it was tremendously successful. This was also, incidentally, the pandemic. So I ran that program 6 times, I think, over the next few years. I created a group program around teaching reed making called Zero to Reed Maker. I created a weekly group workshop called Read Club, where everyone could just come together Monday nights and make reads together, and we could teach as much as was required. I could support them in other ways. We could give accountability, we could give support, we could give sympathy. We sort of morphed it into, reed making accountability plus oboe therapy. And it turned out beautiful in that way. I have created so many group programs since then, and I'm fully bought in on it. As my way to keep talking about the oboe and talking about careers and talking about the magic of what we get to do without burning out and without having to trade my hours for dollars in such an explicit way. And so my intention today is to talk to you a little bit about how and what. A huge benefit of teaching your students together instead of exclusively separately is that you get to build a studio culture. You know already that with your individual students, like, you have a relationship with that student, and after a little while you understand what kinds of words to use to inspire them, what how much to push them, what they need help with. You need that, and you don't lose that when you work with groups. But the magic is that everybody else in the group also knows that person and understands what they're working on and what their goals are and what their challenges are. And everyone else in the group can cheer them on when they suddenly click into being able to do vibrato, when they suddenly for the first time make a reed that they can actually play on, when they suddenly like master the skill of the A flat major scale. When I am rooting my student on, like, fine, but it's just but when an entire group of their peers are also cheering them on, that's even more motivation, right? I don't know about you, but I'm extremely concerned about that first orchestra rehearsal where I walk in and I like play my solo for my colleagues on the stage. I'm not the least bit concerned about the eventual performance for the audience. That's not scary. It's my peers that I want to impress. And the more you can work with groups and the more people can see and understand that everyone is on the same journey, that everyone is working on things, that even the very, very best players have challenges, and that even the very, very worst players, worst is a relative term, worst is not great, but even the very most beginners have strengths that are worth building on. So building your studio culture, creating the community for students so that they know they're not alone. Raise your hand or agree with me in the chat if in your high school you were the weirdo who was into music when nobody else really was, where you were like the band geek, where you were not one of the popular kids because of your obsession with like what you were doing musically. So you can create a community for your students. You can develop a common language for basic concepts. My daughter took cello lessons for like a hot minute, and I think they're a unique kid and they needed special things. So my child's teacher developed some language around like treating the bow like a caterpillar. But it turns out that my child's teacher used talking about like glue on the bow hold or something like that. I don't remember, with other students. And then every time she tried to bring glue into the conversation with my daughter, like it didn't jibe because that wasn't a thing that she had introduced, because we had talked about caterpillars or something instead. Maybe this doesn't quite make sense, but my point is, if you are able to have a conversation in which you teach the concept in the way you want to teach it to everybody at once, suddenly that becomes something you can refer to quickly and easily when you're in individual sessions, when you're in the group, and it becomes something that they can use as shorthand to talk to each other. It becomes something that they can really use. And maybe most importantly for you as the human who is also a music teacher, when you're working with groups, you can take back your time, because it takes a heck of a lot less time to teach a concept one time to 12 people than to teach it 12 times to 12 different people. If you begin to integrate groups into your teaching, you can take back an entire week of 4:15 Tuesday private lessons and turn it into one Saturday session, reclaiming your time. I'll talk more about that later. And you can also uncap your income, because let's face it, there are only so many half-hour slots during the day that you can teach individual lessons. But if you can get 15 kids all into 1 hour, or 12 kids into an hour and a half, or whatever the magic is for you, suddenly your income for that hour can explode in a really beautiful way. So uncapping your income is a really valuable way to think about teaching group classes. So what kinds of things can you teach in groups? What kinds of things might you want to teach in groups? Okay, my first question to you is, what are the things that you teach over and over and over again to where you're like almost tired of the sound of your voice saying it? Like the student falls into a hole and you're like, oh, I got to talk about high register now. Okay. When we talk about the high register, here are some of the things that we think about. And you have like sort of a pre-formed script that you use to talk about this concept. And you teach it over and over and over again to students at the moment that they need it, right? Because it's not like this week is high register week. Maybe it is in your studio, but it's not for me. We just meet the student where they are. And I'm like, oh, okay, guess we better talk about high register. Guess we better talk about cross fingerings. Oh, this is the time where we have to talk about how to adjust your reed. Vibrato. Like I teach it the same. My conception of vibrato is the same for every student. The words I use might be a little bit different, but it's the same concept, and every single person needs to be taught it at some point. What if you could just do that once? What if you could do it once a semester or once a year, so that the new people are learning it, the older people are reviewing it and improving and finessing what they do, the older people can help the younger people, And you don't have to go over the same thing 15 times that semester. Those things where you're tired of hearing your own voice saying them, they are ripe for teaching them in groups instead. Let me know in the Q&A if you want to, what some of those things are for you. I have done things like air support. How do you think about, like, how do you find support? What does that even mean in your body? Embouchure. How do you form a good oboe embouchure? And how do you like allow it to nuance and develop as you grow and change? Voicing. What is the difference between a high note and a low note? Fast tonguing. Everyone at some point needs to like get their single tongue to be faster. What if you just broke it down and made it a group class so that you could teach it once, teach it the way you feel it should be taught, instead of sort of frantically in the last 10 minutes of the lesson when the student's like, oh, also I have this problem. And allow yourself to be really intentional about it. You can make worksheets, you can make examples, you can plan it in advance and like give the world's best introduction to fast tonguing once. It's magical. Legato, dynamics. There are so many things. Individual pieces that you teach all the time. I don't know if anyone here is a Suzuki teacher, you work with groups a lot more often, but literally everyone goes through those same pieces, the Lightly Row, the Happy Farmer, whatever those songs are. What if you did a group session and showed everybody how that works? Yeah, in the chat, I'm seeing reading guitar tab and music. Yeah, reading music, teaching every student Crazy Train. Like everybody at some point in their development goes through the Saint-Saëns Sonata for oboe. So what if we took the second movement where the cadenzas are like, there's a challenge there that happens the same for everybody, and talked about how do you balance like what you see written on the page as it relates to your own musicianship and your own musicality, and how do you do it? Every oboist bumps into these over and over again. I have so many different kinds of shtick to teach them, and it's real fun to teach it in a group. Here's another idea. What are the things that you never seem to have time to teach, and you get frustrated by that? Because, you know, the year goes on as it goes on, and the students are always bringing like, oh, I'm bringing my band music because we have a concert next week, we have a competition next week. Or, you know, in the context of a half-hour lesson for oboe, there's no time to teach reed making. In a 45-minute lesson, there's barely any time to teach reed making. I have a ton of warm-ups and ways of thinking about your warm-up to really weaponize your practice. And I never seemed, when I was teaching private lessons exclusively, to have time to go over some of these bigger concepts. We always sort of get to the end of the lesson and I'm like in mid-thought, and then they have to scamper away. So what are the things that you wish you could teach and that you wish you could give your students a grounding in? Theory, for example. Like being able to look at the music on their page and sort of analyze, what key are we in? What does a key even mean? What is the circle of fifths and why is it relevant to you? Analysis and form, like sonata form. Look, we've come back to the recap. What's a recap? It's where the first theme comes back in the other key. Like you can make time to share this kind of teaching outside of the context of the regular like day to day to day to day to day lesson teaching, week to week to week. And it can be really, really magical. Let's see. I had another thing that you can do in group classes is a master class where the people in the room get to perform one at a time for the teacher and for the class, and then you get to coach them. The magic here is that we sort of de-emotionalize the process of performing in front of human beings. We make it safe. to do that, so that like concerts that come up once or twice a year, the end of the year recital doesn't have to be quite such a huge heavy lift for the students emotionally. Just getting to come in, normalizing the fact that everyone makes mistakes, that there are that bringing a work in progress and playing it in front of people is not so scary, that it does not have to be perfect. And the thing is that the more specific your teaching is, the more universal it becomes. So I've found when I'm doing masterclass style teaching, I'll have one person up on the screen, they will perform their piece. I will choose something about it that like can be improved upon after praising them up the wazoo and like complimenting everything that they've done. And as I talk about that specific thing, and as I coach that one person to improve, silently behind their mute buttons, all of my other participants are like, oh, trying things out. They're like, they hear me talk about a fake fingering. They're like, oh, let me see if that works for me. They hear me talk about voicing or improving vibrato or making a better plan about phrasing. And they want to try it behind their mute buttons. If we were live, the same thing would happen. It would just be mental for them. But it is, as you have experienced, I'm sure, sitting through master classes yourself, when you are not the one in the hot seat, you can so clearly hear where the problems are and see what is fixing them. And you can think about, how does this relate to me? Do I have this problem? Do my students have this problem? How can I learn from what is being discussed? And that's a magical thing, because when you're not in the hot seat, you get to learn. When you are in the hot seat, you also get to learn, and you get to de-emotionalize the performing aspect of it. It's another really good way to build studio culture, because you teach your students how to give positive and constructive feedback, and then everyone can participate in caring about the musical journey of the other people in the class. If you're teaching online, if you're teaching in real life, of course, ensemble playing is an obvious choice, right? You can put people together, talk about intonation, talk about leadership, talk about cueing, talk about sight reading in real time. There's a million things you can do. But even on an online platform like Musi, like Zoom, where I teach, if everyone in the room is muted, and I am not, I can play the accompaniment part of a duet, and everyone in their own space can have the individual experience of enjoying that duet, because they hear me and they hear themselves. It's not cacophonous and latency challenged as it would be if we were trying to do it live. But there's a real way to teach rhythmic integrity, intonation, and like good ensemble playing and good ensemble habits in that way, even online. Tricks, like best practices. I have found that the most magical thing about working in a group is the interaction that happens. Like, I can prepare and prepare and prepare, as I have done for today. But it is the questions that people ask that make me realize some of the things that I haven't prepared, right? I've got an entire lifetime's worth of knowledge and experience inside my head. I cannot possibly prepare in advance to get it all out within a 45-minute session. So I do the best I can, and then I listen to what people ask. In order to encourage interaction, even among shy people, I nearly always start my session making sure that everyone's voice comes into the room somehow. Here we are in webinar format, right? But you'll notice that I asked right away for you to engage in the Q&A, for you to engage in the chat, because having opened that line of communication makes it ever so much more likely that later in the class, when you ask people if they have questions, they might feel brave enough to ask their questions. They might feel welcomed enough to speak in the room, even the shy ones. Um, I often ask for things like, not questions, but does anyone have a reaction to what we've talked about here? Does anyone have a reflection? What was your biggest aha? What was the most helpful thing for you? And note, I will ask this at the end of this session. So, like, be noticing, be thinking. So making sure everyone's voice is heard early on. I will often come in with an icebreaker. What was the most recent thing you played on your oboe? What will you crow your reed at me? What did you have for breakfast? Like, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just getting everyone's voice heard in the room. If it's the first time you're doing a group or the first time people are meeting each other, of course, walking around the room and encouraging people to give the 30-second version of their story that brought them to right now can be a useful thing. If it's too large a group to accommodate that, if that's going to take 15 or 20 minutes of your time, you can do it in breakout rooms. You can do it simultaneously. Look, all together on the count of 3, everyone is going to say what they ate for breakfast and then set an intention for what you're going to do, what you're going to learn today. Anything like that, just to so that people don't come in like in that Ferris Bueller scene where all the students are like, and the teacher goes, Bueller, Bueller. Like, that's not the energy you want in your group class. So get engagement right away. Psychological safety is really important in groups. Like, we're not trying to build a culture, or I'm not trying to build a culture of fear and perfectionism, right? I want it to be extremely safe for people in the room to make a mistake, to bring something that they don't exactly know whether it's going to work, to try something and maybe to fail, because that's how we learn. So I normalize mistakes. I encourage positive feedback. And I do this by every single time someone plays. I start by naming everything that I loved about it. Like, name what works. It could have been a disaster, right? It could have been terrible, but I can say things like, your first note had so much confidence. I can say things like, this one slur, count with me, bar 5, 6, 7, 7, when you slurred down from the E to the G. Amazing. That was the best moment of your whole thing. Because by naming the things that work, I can give them something to feel proud of and something to build on. And it's only after that that we talk about the things that maybe didn't go quite as well. Because mistakes are normal. Everyone makes mistakes. I make them all the time. Okay, those are some of my thoughts in there. Do we have reactions so far? I have like another couple of little segments to talk about. But if questions have sparked for you, if you're like, oh, but this would never work for me, if anything is coming up for you, like, go ahead and hit me, because I'm always interested. Okay, on a very practical level, how might you use group classes in your own teaching? Like, I hope I've convinced you a little bit that there can be plenty of pedagogical value. It's not just for fun. Sam says, I love the idea of starting off with positivity when you're responding to students' work. Yeah, absolutely. And here's another thing. Very often, they'll get to the end of their share, and the student themselves will be like, oh, this is awful. And they'll like freak out at me a little bit. And I'll encourage them to name 1 or 2 or 3 things that they liked about their own performance before we dig into the bad stuff. And like, of course, we're going to talk about the things that didn't go well. That's where the learning comes. But being able to acknowledge your own strength and growth, like, that's a life skill. You want to be in the gain, not the gap. You want to be in the place of being able to see how far you've come rather than the place of seeing how much farther you have to go. Okay, how might you use this in your own teaching? You could, if you're currently teaching almost exclusively private lessons, you could add one extra session per month, a group session, just once. And it could be the springboard for raising your rates. I am always going to come down on the side of getting musicians paid more for what we do. And if you're teaching private lessons and you've been like, I really want to raise my rates, but I'm already charging such and such an hour, and that's so much, bump it up by the cost of another lesson per month, but do it as a group. So once a month, you're going to have masterclass time. You're going to have a guest teacher. You're going to have, I'll talk about guest teachers in just a second. You'll have an extra session on scales, an extra session on theory, an extra session on reed making. It's only going to cost you an hour and a half of your time, but you get to bump up your monthly tuition by one lesson's worth for everybody. Magic. What if instead of that you replaced 1 week of teaching with a group class? The same rate. So you're teaching week 1, week 2, week 3, 20 students a week, 30 students a week. Week 4, you put them all into 2 different groups, beginners and intermediate, boys and girls, whatever it is, guitarists and saxophonists. And in that final week, you only have 2 hours to teach, and you can use your saved time to go and get a massage, or to do some professional development of your own, or to do more planning, or anything that you want. Your money stays the same, your time improves. What about this? What if you added 1 extra session per month, per quarter, per semester? But more often is better, I think. 1 extra session, and you make it free for your current students. You probably also raise their rate a little. You make it free for your current student, but you also market and advertise it to all of the students in your area. So now, now people are paying you for that 1 extra group class. And it's a recruitment tool because people get to come in and see how you teach, see what your studio culture is like, see what the magic is that everyone is experiencing. And you get to get your message out about, this is the way I think about sight reading. This is the way I talk about dynamics. Here's the all-state repertoire for this year in my state. We're going to do a group class talking about exactly that. It's free for my own students, and here's how you join my studio. And it's $50 or $29 or $79 or whatever is appropriate for all of the other students in the area. It's not that you're trying to poach other teachers' students, but it is that you're trying to raise awareness of your own studio and the magic that you can bring. And you make a little extra money, of course, doing that. You could move your entire studio to weekly group classes only. You could develop a curriculum where you teach exclusively in groups and alternate masterclass performance classes with curriculum-based classes. Maybe you could have 1 private or 1 semi-private lesson per month or per quarter, so that you continue to give them the one-to-one support they need, but you could just move it all to groups if you wanted to. You could charge extra for those private one-to-one sessions if you wanted to. You could split your studio up by age or ability, which I mentioned a little bit ago, so that the beginners are in 1 group and the more advanced people are in another group, so that you can teach to the level they are. Or you could choose not to do that, and instead you could teach the curriculum to the entire range of your students and split them up into groups and have the older ones help the younger ones, because they learn more by doing that and the younger kids can like look up to them really beautifully. You could bring in guest teachers. I thought I wrote that down, but I didn't get there. I do this for my my Invincible Oboist Flow program that I run now. And I love it because every time I bring in like a high level teacher, I pay them a little bit, sure, but I'm getting paid more than I pay them. And I get to just sit back, like jaw agape, learning from the teacher, even as my students are getting so much benefit. And there's really only so many ways to play the oboe. I'm not really worried that anyone's going to like lead my group wildly astray, but there are different ways to talk about it and different ways to approach it. And so it's magical to bring in guests, and it brings so much value to your studio. Okay, and my last little segment here that I have prepared is what are things that I have specifically taught in groups in one or more of these ways. I've got a ton. Here's a short and curated list. I've done a week's worth of warm-ups where every day for 20 minutes we get together in a room and do long tones, scales, and sight reading together on Zoom. And as I'm going through, I explain why we do long tones, scales, and etudes, why we practice sight reading as part of our warm-up, what is the benefit, and how can people tweak it for their own use. That is something that I offer for free to my studio and for money to the outside world. And I always get 5 or 6 additional people in there. I did a summer-long deep dive on the Britten 6 metamorphoses, 6 movements that are standard in the oboe repertoire. Every week, we dug into one of those movements really deeply. Somebody played it, we coached on it, and we talked about how the skills that we learn inside that exact piece translate outward to all sorts of other moments in the oboe repertoire, how the skills transfer. I think I sold that program for $397 or something. Again, it was free to my continuing students and high value to other people, and helped to recruit more people for me. I have a couple of different scale games that I use in my own teaching, and they're not particularly difficult, but they're a little cumbersome to teach. I never can make time to do that individually. So I've absolutely done those in a group. We're going to get together just this one day, and I'm going to teach you how to use the Marcel Debost scale game. Michel Debost, excuse me. I've done a class on knife skills and reed adjustment. Just 1 hour, 3 skills. Here are some live examples of reeds that need to be adjusted. And maybe if we don't have reed makers in here, that's not a thing for you. But what technically could be taught in that way as an extra bonus class? Like, is guitar tuning a challenge? Is adjustment, like all of the little adjustment screws on the oboe, that's a big thing. Guitar setups, yeah, perfect. You can do that. Reed making, start to finish. I actually made a full digital course about it, but I've taught it live as well. Totally in demand. Everyone needs to learn that. Articulation. How do you conceive of your articulation? How do you use it artistically? How do you practice it to speed it up and make it better and better and better? I think I did that as a 5-day deep dive program. What else? High register, fingerings and voicings. What changes for you physically as you like move into the highest register of the instrument? 5th position in a string. Sarah says, guitar and ukulele seem so individual because of the vast choice of repertoire. Yes, there's a ton of repertoire, and I agree that because the oboe's rep is so limited, there are opportunities, but do you pedagogically find yourself teaching some of the same pieces over and over again? As you are teaching different pieces, are there common pitfalls that people fall into? Are there some pieces that are better than others that you would love to have more of your students work on because they teach a specific useful thing? would it be valuable for all of your students to have a grounding in, like, specifically some Baroque style, specifically some like boogie woogie style, specifically a walking bass line? I'm like just using words that I don't even totally know what they mean. Is there some generalization that you can create for them, even though they might come in with a gajillion different pieces of music? Because it's honestly not that important in my flow program, which is almost exclusively performance masterclass based. Like, my students bring in all kinds of things, and sometimes I look in advance at what I'm about to be coaching on, and sometimes I don't. They just start playing, and I'm like, okay, I don't know this piece, but here's what I hear that needs to be addressed, and everyone can learn from it. I have taught an entire hour-and-a-half session on ornamentation. Like, what does it mean when you get a squiggle on top of the note versus a squiggle with a line through it versus a gruppetto turn versus a trill? And how do we realize those things? How to sight read. What are some of the skills that you use when you sight read like a pro? How to practice for technique. What are some of the tricks that I use to like solve technical problems? How to practice for artistry. How to deal with performance nerves. These are all things that I've taught in groups that I have either done as part of my studio or as additional add-on things that I've charged for separately. I am personally so bought in on groups for all of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, mostly because it's fun and I really love doing them. And so this closes my presentation. Do you have questions, reactions, reflections, observations, or points of disagreement? Which is fine because I love to explore those. In the chat, Sam says, practice classes are my favorite way of getting students into a group. Yeah, amazing.
They are. So I figured I'd pop back in too
Cool.
and sort of answer some of those questions just from my own point of view, and then anyone with questions just drop them in the Q&A as well, and I'll sort of pull those out and we can chat about them. And the practice groups, you mentioned this earlier, and just again a second ago, about how to get started with groups. I think this is one of the best and simplest ways to get a group going, and with one of the most beneficial resources, which is how to effectively practice. And I think so many teachers take for granted that we were the band geek who spent the hours in the classroom and took the guitars to school and everything like that, and we just kind of adopted those practice habits. And the practice classes are probably my favorite way of getting into this. So just to answer what they are is the way I do it, and maybe you can fill in if you have something different too. The way I've done it in the past is I basically have an hour slot open maybe once a week or once every other week. And as you said, for my current students, it's a freebie. But if anyone else wants to come in, then it's like a paid extra. And basically the idea is that I spend the hour practicing like what I want to practice. So I work on whatever it is I'm in the mood to work on, because I never actually get any time to practice. So it's a selfish like hour for me to do what I want. And while I'm practicing, I vocalize everything that I'm thinking about while I'm practicing. And then that obviously gets questions going, and then students, and they're free to practice as well on their, so they can mute themselves and just practice and kind of have like the, you know, like going to a coffee shop to do work, because it's like being alone together sort of thing. So that's like part of it. And the other part is me vocalizing what it is I'm thinking about if I'm practicing a passage repetitively, I'll explain, okay, I'm having an issue with this measure. So now I'm going to isolate this measure and I'm going to repeat this measure 5 or 6 times. Or one that I love doing is working on songs backwards, like learning the last part of the song first, because otherwise you just repeat the beginning over and over and again and never actually play the end of the song very much. So those are like just things that I vocalize, and whatever it is, you know, whatever happens to be on the docket that day. And students, of course, will ask questions as they go. but basically it's a free, and parents love it because it's a dedicated practice time for the students to sit down and actually work. And they kind of learn the skills of how to practice. And it's just an open invite. It's just anyone from my studio is welcome to come to them. I will be there practicing whether or not anybody shows up. It's a little bit of a selfish thing, but also it benefits everyone in my studio at the same time.
Oh, it's great. It's like it's an accountability time. Like if nothing else, it's an hour that you set aside for yourself and that they can set aside for themselves to like actually get the practicing done. And it's a like window into your practice brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's and I found it really effective. And like I said, the parents love it because it's basically a free class to them. And then that is a way I've also found to facilitate getting into the groups, because what I'll notice is I'll have, random students will kind of show up, and then if they're asking similar questions, or I'm realizing that they're sort of on the same wavelength as each other, or, and then I'm like, oh, these two are like maybe different styles, but like skill level, technique, mental capacity, like they're very much in line with each other. Like these two would be good to start off like a buddy lesson with. And then, and maybe if they're the same age or something, because then I'm like, hey, there's another 15-year-old kid over here who plays, like you guys should like get to know each other. And then you kind of use that to build in the actual group lessons. Because, obviously just taking your roster and being like, okay, we now do group classes is a big overhaul. And that's not
a big change.
You can just flip a switch and do. So I found that to be sort of a more natural way of creating. Like the VR group class came about because a bunch of my students were telling me that they all have VR headsets and I have one. And so I was like, I know there's like a classroom app in there that is like for kids. So I asked all the parents, and I was like, would everyone be cool with this? And they're like, go for it. It sounds great. So we do theory classes in a virtual classroom where like I can write on a whiteboard and they can see what I'm writing on the whiteboard, and they love it because they can like throw stuff in the VR thing. So like they can throw like apples and like things like that. So they're having a blast, like fooling around, but
helping you with things, but they're also learning.
Yeah. And then they also have their own little whiteboards. So I can ask each person to write, like maybe I give them a key signature and I put it on the board and ask them to write down what key signature they got, and they can all hold up their board at and so we can literally play like fully interactive games and fully interactive lesson material in the virtual space, and the kids love it because they're like, hell yeah, I get to use VR for school. And then and then the parents are like, this is awesome, it's a free extra class, and my kids are like really enthusiastic about going to it.
Coolest.
And it's my my slippery way of getting theory into especially with guitar players. Theory is really hard to like get into as a guitar player. We kind of do everything the opposite way around. We all learn how to play first and then how to apply the knowledge
you learn to play by like the shape of your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like only later do you translate that into like what are these actual
exactly.
not visual like the piano.
Yeah. So how did we introduce students to each other? What's their channel to interact? So with the group thing, I actually have the students interact with each other like in the room while we're there together. So and on Musi you can do the like breakout audio thing where you can have like you can set it so only certain people can hear each other talking. So kind of like a breakout room, just without people leaving the room. And so the idea there is that I'll have, and like, because I'm just practicing my own stuff, I don't need to, like, I can stop practicing and I can like interact with them and talk to them and everything. So that's my way of like, they'll be in the lesson, they might be literally asking the same questions, or I see their reactions to what I'm talking about, and then I'll literally say like, you guys, like, I know that you live like 10 feet away from each other, so you should like get together, or I'll talk to the parents and have them facilitate something like that. And then I'll suggest buddy lessons. So that's sort of my way of like actually getting them to interact with each other. And then specifically, if I have like a song idea or something, with certain students, what I've done is we have this thing called clips, where basically that I can record something and then you can record something, and it merges them together into a single recording. So for students, you can set up a clip and have both of the students record their parts for each other. So like if I have a guitar student and a bass student, I might have them like pair up, and maybe I'll have them work on Crazy Train, where one of them does the bass line and one of them does the guitar line, or one of them does a harmony or something like that. So I use those kinds of tools to like actually get the kids to interact before maybe actually putting them into a lesson or anything.
Amazing. To something that was said that you mentioned earlier, Sam, about like you can't just take your studio and go, "Boop, now we do exclusively groups."
Right.
It's true, right? You're going to lose some people when you try to make a gigantic change just at once like that. So what you might do at a time like this, which is the beginning of a new semester,
Yeah.
is announce in your policies that this is the new way we're doing things, is that I'm going to add one free group session per month, and it's optional, and it's going to be awesome, and I'll send you the recording if you can't be there. And from there, after a few months, you can say, wow, parents, based on the feedback I've gotten, these group classes are a huge hit. I'm going to keep doing them. Here's the new fee structure. And like, instead of doing one extra group class, it's going to be maybe the same fee as before, but now it's going to be the fourth week of every month is going to be group instead of individual. Like, you can evolve toward it.
Yeah.
And like that sort of is in general my approach to business.
Right.
It's easy to have a good idea. You throw it into action, you try it.
Yeah.
And if you don't quite like it, you tweak it and try it again. If you do like it, you evolve towards it and you move towards it. So over the course of another year or so, I could easily see evolving to a partial or majority group experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a fantastic way of doing it. It's like for me, it was do the VR thing, do the practice classes, and then for me, just as a person on my schedule, I'm a bit busy too. I'm like the one person in the world who's not trying to expand their teaching business. So because music takes up all of my time. But if anything, actually, that's almost a better reason to start seriously thinking about taking on group lessons instead of one-on-one lessons, because I have such a limited time that I have to limit my roster to no more than 10 students a year. So if anything, I'd actually be better off doing like 2 groups of 5 instead of 10 individual lessons, because then I could actually do 4 or 5 groups of 5, and I could still keep a bigger roster and not need to cut down so much. So that's actually a perfect example of how I personally could apply it. But yeah, I think groups are the future of education as well. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's also like the past
of education.
but like not privately for some reason. Private lessons have always been private lessons. But it's funny seeing more and more teaching private teachers. Literally almost every single person that signs up for Musi says something along the lines of, I want to teach groups, but I don't yet, or I don't know how. That's like, I would like to, because I think everyone is aware of the sort of the fundamental problem of paying for one session. That's like the limited factor. So it's just interesting to see that this is sort of the trend that's moving forward. But thank you so much for taking the time. Do you have any other last thoughts or anything for everyone?
I mean, if it's okay, Sam, I'd love to share like a quick link. And just let you know that, like, if this is something that is exciting to you and interesting to you, and you can't quite see your path toward getting started with it, I would love to talk with you about it. Like, this is something that I do. This is something that I help people with. I'm really passionate about it because I want musicians to get paid more and free up more time in their schedules and get their messages out to more people. I think it's important. So I'm throwing a link in the chat, which is just a book a quick call with me, and I'll toss my website in there as well so that you can read more. Jennet Ingle.
Definitely. I strongly suggest taking the time to do a call. No skin off your back, so it's definitely worth
exactly
conversation. Like, so
yeah.
And like I said at the beginning, there's tons of other resources that you provide. from the podcast, the book, to the other courses. So
Yes.
there's a lot of content on that website to dig through. So, take the time and really learn about sort of what's going on in your world.
Thank you, Sam.
Absolutely. Thank you so
All right.
much for taking the time to be here with us.
Oh my God, what a pleasure. I could talk about this all day. Thank you so much.
Me too. Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks so much. I will talk to you soon.
Okay,
All
bye.
right. Bye.